All right, all right, all right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy Podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian, Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. Tonight, we're going to ride that train all the way to Eugenics town as we're going to be talking about Snowpiercer. That's right, it's a near future scenario where scientists try to combat global warming and fuck things up royally, and then we get class warfare mixed with eugenics and a little bit of wag the dog going on, and we're going to have a great guest to come talk about it. This is the 175th episode of the show, but before we get into that on the Last Nighters portion and mention who he is, he's a returning guest, and he's a very good guest. Lots of people like him. We do too. Spoiler alert, everyone. But let's check in with my co-host, Robert, before we get in the Last Nighters portion of the show. How you doing, Robert? Helps if I unmute you, sir.
Does it?
It does. I have the power to keep you quiet, and I have the power to allow you to speak. So you may speak now.
Does that make you feel good? Make you feel strong?
You may speak now, peasant, but you may not leave your home.
What do you want me to talk about, Daniel?
How has the virus been affecting your livelihood and your freedoms?
Well, entrepreneurially, sales are down about 50%. My income is down about also 50%, maybe a little bit more, around 60%. And, I'm okay. I'll be okay. But our employees, they are struggling with what measly hours we can kick down to them. They've had to take up other jobs, and I don't even know if they're available anymore. We had a Subway in town, the sandwich shop chain, and then that one shut down. So I don't know. One of our former employees got a job with Subway. I don't think she's getting him hours anymore. It's a tough time. It's tough to be in the food business. A lot of restaurants, they thought they would be able to switch over to takeout only, but depending on your menu and your business model, you can't just switch over and do that. So a lot of restaurants have shut down. It's not great times.
Yeah, it's not easy being cheesy or under the thumb of a liberal governor who's got a power trip going on. But it doesn't shut down movie review shows, which is what we do here. So why don't we get into the Last Nighters portion of the show, introduce our guest, and start talking about this movie, all about that class warfare.
This one's a beast. Bong Joon-ho. Guy's a monster.
Come on and ride that train. Come on, ride the train and ride it. I'm hearkening back to 20 years ago, terrible songs, and we're going to be talking about a train movie, Snowpiercer, on this Last Nighters episode 118. And you can find this on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in direction, and also at lastnighters.com/118. That will be the show notes and more. And we're going to be talking about the Oscar-winning director's film, Snowpiercer. He won this year for Parasite, which is another one that might be worth doing sometime in the future. But this is a movie that was handpicked by our guest. He's a returning guest. He was on for The Outlaw King. And was it The Truman Show? There's something else. It's Olaf the Anarcho-Viking. Welcome back to the show, my friend. It's very good to see you here, and I appreciate you joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be back. I love your show, and it's an honor to be here. I was on for Spirited Away, the animated Miyazaki masterpiece that I thought very highly of, but maybe a little bit lukewarm for certain other people.
Oh, those are fighting words. Well, thank you. Going to come back after we trash that a little bit. Now, I do think it was good, and I do have an appreciation for Miyazaki as a result of that, and I do want to watch more of his movies. And I saw that all of the Studio Ghibli films are coming to Netflix everywhere but in the U.S., unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't paid attention, but yeah, there are other ways you can find them, obviously. But yeah, it would be nice to have them all collected. Like if you have something like Disney Plus, I would like to have something like Studio Ghibli Plus, or like add addendum to Disney Plus, something that it would be nice to have them, a collection of them.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you for coming back on, and we will have the show notes page with your prior appearances on. And we will start off with the Google description information, and then we'll go to Robert for his reaction and his opening diatribe, which he's always got one in the chamber there. Speaking of one in the chamber, if you are one to carry a firearm for self-defense purposes only, and you are legally authorized to do so, I can't give any advice that's not quote-unquote legal, but there's this new holster that I've got, and it's amazing. It maintains your firearm below your belt line, and it's still accessible. It's called the Urban Carry G3, and you can get one via our affiliate link at lastnarrative.com/G3. Check it out. And one recommendation is, if you do make a purchase, to sign up for their loyalty program first to earn points on your initial purchase, and then you get money off any future purchases as a result too. We'll have this on the show notes page as well. Just thought I'd throw that in there because it's during times like this, I've been wanting to carry, and my prior method was an inside waistband holster, and it would always print and get exposed whenever I would move. And so I'd always be constantly like trying to cover it up with a shirt or something. And this solves that problem. It's very, very comfortable. So check it out, lastnarrative.com/G3. And back to the show. All right, so Snowpiercer came out 2013. It's a drama/fantasy film, 2 hours and 3 minutes, and it has a 7.1 IMDb, 94% Rotten Tomatoes, and 3.5 out of 4 from Roger Ebert's Corpse. The Google users, 85% of them like it. Snowpiercer is a 2013 science fiction action film based on the French graphic novel Les Transpercendiers by Jacques Loeb, Benjamin Legrand, and Jean-Marc Rocher. The film is directed by Bong Joon-ho and written by Bong and Kelly Masterson. So it's really just informational and really nothing to do with the plot of the film. It came out October 21st, 2014 in the US. The director is Bong Joon-ho, who won the Best Director for Parasite, or was it Best Film? I want to say Best Film.
It was Best Picture, yeah.
Best Picture. He didn't win Best Director, right? Or did he?
He might have. I don't remember.
Okay, well, here we are doing a movie review show, and we don't know shit about movies.
Well, who gives a shit about the fucking Oscars, Daniel?
You're GD right, Robert. All right, so budget, $40 million. It won a bunch of awards and was on some many best 10 lists from 2013, 2014. The first critic review I see is Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer envisions a post-apocalyptic world on a train where first class is fabulous and the economy cars are a lot like hell. Let's go to Robert for his reaction, and then we will go to our guest, Olaf.
Well, I assume you said something in those last few seconds. I just want to congratulate you, Daniel, on your French pronunciation. You nailed those names. That was like listening to a native talk. But anyway, Snowpiercer. It's Bong Joon-ho. He likes to play with class, clearly. Maybe he's got some other films that he doesn't do this, but in these two films that I know him for, Parasite and this, it's all about class. This one, I think, more so than Parasite. Parasite's a little more subtle, but not much more subtle. But this one's straight out of like, you got the have-nots and you got the haves, and that's basically it. It starts off as a premise like The Matrix, except, the humans destroyed the sky to fight global warming. In The Matrix, they're doing it to fight the robots. But, this is it's a closed system movie, and the economics don't add up. And I'm going to have similar complaints to the episode, if you heard it, with the Village, M. Night Shyamalan's Village movie, where there's this closed system and the economics just make absolutely no sense. In this movie, it's similar. It tries to play a little bit of lip service to it actually making sense, but it really, really doesn't. They kind of hand wave it away with it being a train and saying it's stocked to the gills and there's like technology that magically saves everything. But I'll still have my complaints. But the movie features excellent direction, excellent acting, especially by the lady that played the glasses wearing lady. I don't know her name, but she was fantastic. Tilda Swinton. Swinton was fabulous. Sorry, I didn't remember your name, Tilda, but you were fantastic. You gave excellent, like, religious speeches, like really mythologizing the great train maker guy. It was really a lot of fun to watch, even for a second time. This is the second time I've seen it. First time I was just watching it as a sci-fi fan. This time I was watching it as like this ANCAP sci-fi fan. So I was really keying in on, the economics and then the statements of this socialist utopia or the communist class struggle that's really being sort of portrayed in this movie. Although I have an issue with that, and maybe this could be our first talking point. In the general class theory of communism, if I understand it correctly, the bourgeoisie basically suck off of the excess labor of the proletariat, and they really live high on the hog, really not doing a whole lot off the labor of the working class. And in this movie, you've got the high on the hog people, but they just happen to have bought a first class ticket. Maybe that's like a metaphor for being born into the upper class. But in this movie, the lower class people in the back of the train don't do anything. They're not really workers. A few of them do. There's a guy that maintains the machinery of the food making protein block thing. But everybody else just kind of lays around. So I don't think the metaphor quite works for the ultimate communist metaphor for the life. But I don't know. I thought that was a little bit strange. Like, wouldn't you want the upper class really living high on the hog based on the working class people in the back of the train just slaving away doing stuff? But it wasn't. They were just kind of hanging out. And then the upper class people would come along whenever they needed like a random person to do something and just steal them. But other than that, they weren't just like living on their labor. So that's my opening salvo. I've got tons and tons of notes to talk about this movie. It's very dense. There's all kinds of stuff. It even features some of the most unrealistic rifle shots or weapon shots in movie history. And that's saying something. So, but it's okay. Go ahead.
All right. Well, yeah, I think that this is a can of worms of an episode or of a movie, of course. And I do think that you are right, that the critique of if this is supposed to represent communism and class warfare, it's sort of missing one of the elements, and that is the exploitation of the excess labor or the excess value. What's it called? What do the commies call that?
It's exploitation. Either you're taking just labor theft or value theft or something like that.
Surplus value.
There you go.
Yeah, they're really just having these people around so they can push them around. That's about it. That's like,
yeah. What purpose do these people serve? That was my question the whole movie. It was like, you've got all these people in the back who are just kind of eating. They're like the useless feeders. They're not actually doing anything. They're just sitting there and reproducing. And then every once in a while, they got spoiler alert. You gotta kill them off. But anyway.
Well, and you got to take one of the kids to fit in the engine room to operate manually something that broke on the thing.
Well, hey, that's ingenuity. Keeps everybody alive. But that's the one thing that sends him over the top. He's like, no, I can do with the murder, with the child labor. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah. That's the big line. All right, so Olaf, let's go to you for your take on the lack of Google description and anything that we've talked about thus far, and then take us whatever direction you'd like to go, sir.
Yeah, good. So, well, let me start off. It's very nice to see all that snow. It makes me feel right at home from the Nordic part of the hemisphere. But I was not a big fan, and there are some reasons for that too. But I just thought it was a really bizarre movie. And I think when you talk about communist, sort of this class system, maybe it's more sort of accurate describing it as somebody who would make the pitch for, I don't know, some kind of UBI or something like that, because there just wasn't anything to do for these people. The closed system had sort of these limited amount of resources available, and they just had to be kept at bay, because otherwise it would sort of tear down the standard of living for the other people who were consuming the limited resources that were available. But as I see it, the meaning, or you can draw like metaphorically from this, is this almost like a journey through the different class systems of, if you want to call it like a communist dystopia, because it kind of feels like that. But I feel like there's a lot more than just the have and the have-nots. When you travel through it, as you go forward in the train to the different cars, you encounter a new set of like realities that are present there in each of these boxes. And you go through these where they take care of the fish or the plants, and there's some kind of orange grove in like a greenhouse environment, and there are people there meticulously taking care of those environments, and they're kind of filling a purpose to some extent. And even the guy who worked doing those protein bars being all by himself, that's still a step above from the what did you call the tail section of the train, where they just live in like squalor and their own feces, and practicing cannibalism. So it's a little bit, seeing the symbolism of traveling through these different class systems to the front of this, to this mythological space, almost like held up as a deity. Like the engine in itself is a deity that is worshipped by the passengers in the train. And you can see that when they travel through like this educational car, and the children's getting their proper indoctrination to worship this deity that is the engine and its creator, kind of like he held up as a god, Wilford. So that was my impression of the movie. There are a lot of elements that we can talk about within each of these sections, but I think I'm gonna just pause there and see what you guys where you want to take this.
All right. Well, that was good, and yeah, I think you're kind of right, and it's less of a class system and more of a caste system.
Right.
Like you're born in a specific strata, and you can't change from that at all. It's like how I think it used to be set up that way in India. So there was really no advancing even on your merits, and they're very particular about maintaining balance in this environment, this closed system. But sorry, that's really loud. That it felt like a hole to me in the idea of, well, they need to cull the last car by 72% or something like that to get the population in balance. You would think that if they were that far out of balance, that would have been a problem long before. Like, why would they wait until it's 72% or something like that? Like, obviously they can support that amount for a period of time before then they basically manufacture these two competing ends, manufactured by colluding together to create this tension and these revolutions by sort of manipulating people into doing them so that they die as a result heroically or whatever, and commemoratively. And that was kind of the big reveal at the end that made me sort of turn towards liking this movie, because watching it all along, I was like, this is kind of dumb, and it's not getting any better until that final element where you realize that what's the guy's name? Gregor was working with Wilford to manage this whole scenario to get the population down, this population control eugenics system that was going on, using false flags and lies, sort of like the Zbigniew Brzezinski grand chessboard kind of shit. And Robert, you mentioned the Matrix. It reminded me of when they said that when they first put people in the Matrix, it was like a utopia. Whatever the people thought was going on, like, you know, they're in these pods, but the program that they were living in was perfect, abundance, Garden of Eden model. But people would reject that. They needed some tension. They needed some strife. They needed some something to ground it in reality. And it seems similar here. That was what these manipulations were for, was to create that tension and give them purpose and not reject this kind of utopian system, even though it was dystopian for the people in the back, sort of utopian in the very front. And yeah, you're right, Olaf. There were some workers in the middle who seemed to be kind of actually doing something productive. I also noticed as you move further up the train, you got into more degeneracy and more opulence and less caring about doing anything of value or productive. So I know that would be a key talking point for you.
Oh yeah, I mean that was very interesting because you get through these after the tail section that was that's just pure hell, right? So then you get to the guy who's making the food, and he is on board with this. He's really excited. He's like, "This is my place. This is my purpose. I need to be here." And Kurt is like, "What? You don't want to come with us and take the engine? There's a revolution going on." It's like, no, bro. I'm staying. I don't want to be part of this. That's like his reaction to this. And then you get forward again. You get to this closed ecological system of the fish tank and how they make sushi, and you travel through the greenhouse and how they take care of all the fruits. And then you get to the the people that consume the high time preference part of the car that's just full of like hedonism and the social degeneracy, a lot of drug use, kind of like orgy-like environment. People are just high and kind of useless. They're just consumers of this thing. And I am not entirely sure what the meaning of this is and why it's coming in the order that it's coming in from the directors and the producers, and why they structured it that way. But it's really weird because I did not expect that coming. But you kind of see this more, the higher end living becomes less useful, becomes the degeneracy and the individual hedonism seem to increase the higher up that you get in the train, because like this, you know, the luxury you have to pass the time, and you don't have to worry about, you know, starving or eating your own arm or something like that. Then you have to do something, and then you just what can you do? You're in this like really closed environment. There's not, you turn to all sorts of things that you know, are to satisfy short-term pleasure, you know. So there's really nothing to do for these people.
Yeah. So Robert, let's go to you as you take a big swig of water, because I know you're gearing up to say something like a long diatribe based on what we've talked about so far.
Well, you guys have all made some excellent points. It is interesting how you would have almost nothing to do. You'd have to find time to spend your days with. And so it's completely realistic how they would be like, well, I'll turn to drugs or whatever, especially if in this world you're not given a task. Like, these people don't seem to have any jobs. Like, there's only certain people that need to do jobs. Like, there's a dentist, there was like a tailor, and then there's the guy that makes the food, there's the guy that cut the sushi, and there's a few people. There's the people that tend the worms and the
services, Robert, essential services. We're all living Snowpiercer right now in quarantine.
Right, but then everybody else is just living high on the hog, doing nothing. But I think, you know, it's okay. Let me talk about economics for a little bit. Even in the reality of the tail section, even though nobody seems to poop in this train. It's really annoying. Movies, they just ignore that, but there would just be filth everywhere. Anyway,
Right, they lose a point because Robert likes poop in his movies.
I know they're not going to show a poop scene. I'm just saying, if they don't even have food, there are situations in the real world where people are just pooping in cattle cars, and it's horrific. Anyway, even in this environment, there is specialization going on in the train in the revolutionary world. There is trading. There's an economy. They're trading these protein blocks for different things in order to make their tools to create these, like, their plan to escape out of this place, which is good. I liked that. Like, even in a prison, you got economies. So you can't stop people from trading and specializing, which is great. But in a real world scenario, I think you would want to take advantage of the ingenuity and the genius of everybody on board and explain to them the reality of the situation in which they find them. So in the animal world, and human beings are part of that world, we react to hard times, tough times, by not reproducing. We just don't. Same with animals. If there's no food around, population stays steady. They don't just like explode and whatever. I mean, that's just a good way to kill a bunch of kids. So the idea that you got this horrific situation in the tail, but yet they're still breeding like rabbits is a little bit ridiculous. But I think you would want to put everybody's ingenuity towards figuring out how to better the whole train, everybody in it. It seems like a real waste of brain power and ingenuity and just human minds to keep half the train just locked in this crappy cattle car in the back. You're only teaching like a few kids in the middle, and it's like propaganda stuff. I mean, maybe they're learning some science and whatever too, but who knows? But it's like one school car for like a couple of kids. I would be putting everybody to work. I'd have Wilford training everybody on engineering and science and figuring all kinds of crap out the best you can. You got nothing to do but sit around and learn all day. Of course, this is a movie. I understand that, but I'm just saying that in the real world, I think it would play out quite differently. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that there aren't wars and bullshit reasons of wars in the real world too, but you know, China would have like this one-child policy, and that's of course horrific, but I think human beings would naturally understand the conditions they're in, and it wouldn't lead to this rampant overpopulation where, especially if you got these people that are not doing anything, put them to work, get them to do something. If they got nothing else to do, give them some books and they can read up on engineering and economics or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It just seems like
you sort of sound like a central planner there, Robert. Don't you mean just like liberate them and allow them to work if they wish and provide value for others in exchange and all of those things? And I did like that they had cigarettes in there, and there were only 2 left, and so they were super valuable. And they ran out of bullets, or at least they thought they did, which was a convenient plot point, because then there was this show of force or menacing that wasn't backed up by actual live fire ammunition. So that was a key point in a lot. I mean, well, by the end, you don't know if that's like a manipulated thing. Like, oh, let's not have bullets in the guns and let them discover that so that they'll have their revolution. Because if they know that we're armed and actually have ammunition, then they're not going to rise up against us. And we need them to rise up against us so that we can eugenically kill 74.2% of them.
Yeah, and the interesting point also here is that, you know, these soldiers that were pretty much terrorizing the tail section every day for a couple of times a day or something like that, they were pretty low on the totem pole. Like, they were sent out there on the battlefield to people who could potentially kill them without any ammunition at all, and they knew this too. So they were also very low in the hierarchy. Probably not much higher than the tail sections themselves. They were used as slaves, pretty much, by the upper class cars. when they were doing the dirty work down at the tail section, but they had no way to really defend themselves. It was just a smoke screen, like the carrying empty guns. So you have to think about that one too. That they were not, people who were high and on the power structure at all. They were they were just used very low.
They're the thin blue line, Olaf.
Yeah, that's right. Back to blue. Yeah.
Underpaid, underappreciated, and doing the enforcement work for their political betters above them.
Yeah.
That the other thing that it seems like this movie only works if you allow a lot of these contrivances. Like one of the things that really kind of bugged me is that the guy who is the can open the gates, he was apparently locked up in this like sarcophagus thing, and yet he was aware of going over this bridge and this airplane becoming more and more exposed every time. I just don't know how that worked, because if he was locked up in this prison, how did he see out the windows to see that the snow was potentially melting or maybe blowing off of this airplane that was crashed down below this bridge? That part didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at all.
I assumed that he got out. He wasn't just. I think that's where he slept. Did you took that as a prison? I mean, he was locked in there. It's true. I don't know if he was just serving some time.
They said they were going to break him out of this prison. That was like part of their plan.
Yeah, it seemed also like the prison was a step higher up than the tail section itself. It seemed like there was more pleasant to be in the prison than it would be in the tail section. First of all, just want to point that out, which is totally absurd. But yeah, you're right. I did not fully understand how he could have known that unless it was just assumed that he wasn't always in that box and that he had somehow seen this reality on the outside before.
Well, I'm glad you had little nitpicks, Daniel. Let me go off on a tiny little science rant. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it bugged me, so I'm going to talk about it. What are you going to do? It's a perpetual machine engine. Fine, just wave it away as science for the engine to work infinitely, except you need little hands to repair it or whatever. But I had a big issue. Well, not too big, but it was in my mind the whole time I'm watching this film. The second law of thermodynamics says that in a closed system, the entropy in a system will increase, which is entropy, like the usable energy will increase. And it's not a completely closed system, this train. There is sunlight hitting it. But the vast majority of energy would be gone. Like, I mean, I know you're just waving it away, science, saying that this train is like immune to cold or something. But those windows would leach heat like crazy. Just the overall metal of the train would get cold and would leach heat. And eventually this thing would be a moving, just a frozen popsicle. Not only that, but who would be repairing the tracks? The tracks. If the world is so freezing cold, that those tracks are going to get brittle. And tornadoes, gusts of wind are going to put some pressure on that stuff. And I mean, we eventually saw an avalanche, but the idea of a world free of repairmen, I'm sorry. It just bugs me. It's just not realistic.
All right. Yeah. And let's also talk about the hubris that opens this thing, that they got to fight global warming with the chemtrail bioengineering shit. This, what's it called? CW7. And all these experts agree, yeah, this is going to solve our problem and cool the earth. And oops, I must have put the decimal point in the wrong spot. I always do that.
I love how they fail. I love how that's a big failure. It warmed my heart a little bit, that these people who are the know-betters and who think that, top-down approach and they know everything what we have to do in order to, tax ourselves to change the climate. and they just failed miserably. I thought that was actually the greatest part of the movie. It's just a big failure of these people who think they know everything.
Yeah, I did enjoy the central planners trying to save everybody, destroy everything, and then a private actor actually saves people with this train idea, the crazy train idea that would never get past Congress or whatever. It would never be funded. Maybe as somebody's weird little pet project, but it took a private actor to actually keep humanity going.
That's right.
All right, so here's my question to both of you, and I'll go to Olaf first. Is Wilford really the bad guy? Or are those people in that final compartment only alive because of his benevolence? And they're thankless. They hate him for keeping them alive.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, in some instances, you have to look at these people in the condition that they're living, right? And think maybe, because you don't find out everything from the beginning. You find out later on that, you know, these horrific things that's going on in cannibalism and people cutting off their limbs and eating babies and just like, yeah, no, I wish I would have been dead. I do not want to live in that kind of reality. But at the same time, it's, you know, Wilford, who is basically God in this movie, who had mercy on these people and took them in, right? It's only at his mercy that they are alive. So you can see it both ways. But looking at these people, I say, well, no, I mean, maybe I would rather just be dead than living under those conditions. And but at the same time, I mean, he's the only reason why they're alive, because he was the one who built the train. So.
Yeah, I'm wondering what the terms of the contract were when they initially boarded the train, right? Like, did the low rear passengers understand that they would basically just be standing room only, cattle car style, no guaranteed food or anything like that? Or, you know, what are the terms, or what I would want to know in terms about that? Does Wilford have any kind of duty to feed them? I mean, he obviously did eventually. Maybe it wasn't originally in the plan, and they had to make this perpetual cockroach grinding machine with this infinite supply of cockroaches that they get from somewhere. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think he necessarily owes them anything unless there are terms. I mean, I know like, I know Dave Smith likes to use the analogy of, you know, a hot air balloon. Like, you bring a guy, you sell a similar ticket on a hot air balloon, you go up to the top, and then you're like, okay, the hot air ride's over, get out. So, yeah, I mean, kicking people off the train, I think, would be a violation of whatever contract. I don't think there's that. But I don't know necessarily what the terms would be in terms of how much they are owed in terms of, you know, comfort and whatever.
Yeah. Now, did you guys take it that this was an ark that was built because the Earth was cooling rapidly, and so this was a last-ditch effort to kind of save humanity? Or was this like a pre-existing tourist oddity that existed, and then people happened to be on it when the Earth froze?
It seems like it all happened quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it from what I understood it, he built it before the whole thing, before the Earth kind of cooled down, because it was supposed to make like 1 year through all the continents, and you can see the track that it's the path that it's following. But they also say in the education car, talking to the children, that Wilford was so smart that he predicted this. But it sounded like, you know, when they talk about Kim Jong-un or something like that, that, you know, he's so smart, he invented this or that. So I don't know how true that was supposed to be in the movie itself, that he knew that this was coming. But that's how they were taught, at least, that he knew that the Earth was going to freeze because of this chemtrail stunt that the government pulled off, and therefore he saved humanity, essentially. That's how the children were taught, at least.
Yeah, I got the similar sense that he built this thing, which initially had to have been just an economically viable business, training people around. But he must have also had the idea to make it like this perpetual engine that can withstand whatever, in order for it to I mean, be in response to this freezing Earth. Whatever. I mean, we're poking all kinds of holes in the premise of this film. It's less about the science and it's more about the humanity, which I appreciated that.
Yeah, and
But I can rant about the economics if anybody wants me to. I can rant more.
Yeah.
Where did they get all the supplies?
It seems like also what was weird to me was the water supply thing, because they said, okay, so this thing, they have this machine that turns this snow into water, but then you have that would mean that you have absolutely no scarcity at all. That like there's all this water that should be coming in, and yet you wouldn't extend this unlimited resource to these dirty portions of the car. I mean, what about things that can spread to forward in the car? I mean, it seems like if that was the case, that the water came to be the way they were explaining, that would mean that there would have been no scarcity of water, in my view. So that was kind of weird that they couldn't even, host those tail section people off once in a while. Would have been nice.
Yeah, and then how did the tail section people, I don't know, look like not emaciated, like Captain America? I mean, he's a pretty buff dude, and I know they tried to like cover that up a little bit in costume and whatnot, but he's still a big dude,
Yeah.
And if you're eating just these protein bars and lazing around otherwise, I don't think you're going to be in the greatest of shape. You're gonna be like me in quarantine, not being able to work out because I got chickens in my office. And getting a little roundy in the rotundy.
And those protein bars better have like vitamin C, D, and A, or else you're going to have all kinds of health problems.
Oh, they better have vitamin D, dude. They never saw the sunlight.
Yeah.
People, oh my goodness. Like first time they come out in this car after they break through, first one, and just see they're just blinded by this light that's out there. You cannot survive like that without any production of vitamin D. So yeah.
Yeah, so all they had to do was just let these people die of scurvy. They didn't need to foment a revolution and do those wag the dog manipulation stuff. They just, or they could have just stopped feeding them. I mean,
or cut the car.
Yeah, like if they're serving no purpose other than to give you young that you can then extract to maintain the equipment, but couldn't you just
first class people have babies?
Yeah,
but babies.
You can't take their babies, I guess.
Well, those are better babies. It's true. But I mean, they can, if they were like infertile or something, and they're like, that's why we got to do it. That makes more sense. But it just seemed like the rear class people just serve no purpose at all, other than they bought a ticket. But why not? Whatever.
All right. So I have another thing that I thought had some meaning, and that was when Captain America's talking to the John Hurt character, which is named Gregoire, something like that. He says, we need to seize the engine, which is the means of production, and kill them, the bourgeois. And the old man should own the train, not Wilford, because the old man worked on the train. So it's not the person who owned the equipment. It's the person who used the machines to produce something who should own it. This is the total like communist argument for the workers seizing the means of production and the workers providing all the value. Well,
even though they didn't do anything, what did they do? If anything, Wilford worked on the engine, at least, and the kids owned it more than Gregor or Captain America.
Yeah, and that's if you even presume to accept this notion that because you push the buttons, you own the piece of equipment.
Yeah.
How about the guy that invented it, created all the capital required to build the thing in the first place?
I went to the grocery store and moved some boxes around and put them in place. Now I own the store, right? I mean,
that's how it works.
It is absolutely insane. You're right. I did catch that too, but it was so like, I mean, it was so blunt and obvious the way they did it, and I think it was intentional too. So,
yeah, I mean, I'll agree with them as far as you own the product of your own hands. And what implements you own to create things, that's the value you have. And you're more than able to offer that value to others in exchange for a wage or for selling the product of your labor. And I'll add, you should be entitled to the full amount of your labor that you sell it for and it not be taxed away from you. If anything, they should be against the obvious theft of the tax man on the back end taking 30, 40, 50% of your labor, not the front end where somebody's providing you with capital that they've saved for and invested in to make you far more productive than you would otherwise be. Their disdain for people who are screwing them is totally misplaced. The rich or the capitalist class are a scapegoat, a red herring to the political class, who are actually the parasitical.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in this movie, it was more like you didn't. In some rare instances, you got to exchange a slightly more comfort for your labor. Like the guy who was taken to play the violin. I suppose he had a slightly more comfortable existence in the front of the car, playing a little bit of violin every day for the upper class over there. And the guy who moved out of the tail section to produce those cockroach protein bars, I suppose he also maybe had a little bit better of an existence. So yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, and the other thing that all of those guys that got taken out of the back class or the back car and then brought up to do other work, even the kids, seem to be so brainwashed. Like they were like, this is my mission now. I cannot be distracted from my mission. It was anyone who went to the front and did work. It was the violin guy. It was the bug protein bar guy. And even those kids wouldn't respond to anyone who they even knew saying, hey, don't go in that thing. Come over here. No, they were like totally like zombified and going and doing their job. And I wonder if that was intentional and meant to be like some kind of message in this movie, is like some kind of meaningful demonstration of something. I don't even know what a
capitalist slaves are zombies and we don't even realize it. That sort of a thing.
Yeah, something like that. And I also want to ask, who throws a shoe? Which I thought was maybe a play on that Iraqi reporter
thing. Yeah.
And how they responded to this guy throwing a shoe after they took his kid and beat the shit out of him. He throws a shoe at this lady, and then they freeze off his arm and shatter it with a fucking sledgehammer. That was brutal. My wife was wincing at that one.
Oh, that was nasty. That was just awful. Yeah. Probably the most disturbing element in the entire movie, even more so than the axe battle, because you didn't really see much of what's going on. That was really disturbing. It shattered like pieces of glass.
Yeah,
and
it was also like a distraction, I think, because you see them treat this guy this way and cut off his arm, and then you see other people missing limbs, and so you're led to believe that all of these people have been similarly punished for insubordination, but it's revealed later that no, those people actually offered up their limbs cannibal style, like that movie, the Argentinian soccer team that crashed, Alive, where they're eating people.
Oh yeah.
So it was like a misdirection, I think, on the part of the plot.
Yeah, for sure. At first you think these were people that have been punished. Then you find out, no, the actual reason is much more horrific. It's all horrific, but yeah. So what do you guys think of the Wilford character? Got this Malthusian argument that things need to be in balance, that the train is this closed system, and if things get out of balance, they have to be put back, and crashes and burns and we all die. So, I think people are familiar with Avengers Endgame and Thanos, who's also makes a similar Malthusian argument that there aren't enough resources for too many people. Now, Thanos is retarded because, you've got all this innovation happening and it doesn't take into account innovation. I think in this case, Wilford has a little bit better of an argument, at least in the world as presented, in that there really are limited resources. I mean, these are people that have been eating like the same cows and chickens for like 17, 18 years or something like that. They still have all these chickens. So yeah, they really have limited resources. Of course, it doesn't justify you straight up murdering them, but I guess then they just foment this fake revolution, and then people murder each other, and you can just wash your hands clean. Harris makes the argument that humanity devours one another without leadership when he's trying to get Captain America to take his place. And then they actually have a case of that in the movie where Chris Evans is about to eat this baby, but then the old wise guy is like, no, don't eat the baby. Here, I'll show you a better way. Eat my arm. There's leadership for you. And then he's like, whoa, it blows his mind. I would argue that leadership can be good or bad. Political leadership, you're not going to really get wars without political leadership, without religious leadership. Leaders enforce anti-human laws and regulations that lead to murder, kidnapping, theft, poverty. It's a human trait that can be used for bad or good, but I wouldn't say that humanity necessarily devours one another without leadership. I think people can live perfectly peaceful lives according to serving their own best interests.
Yeah, and it depends on what they mean by leadership. I mean, do they mean political leadership or a deity like Wilford is treated in this movie, or just someone who has leadership qualities that helps others better themselves, direct themselves into being more productive and providing value for others. I mean, there's leaders in many different areas. There's voluntary leaders. There's people that you choose to follow and choose to work with or work for, like get back to the capitalist exploiter. Some people are dickhead bosses, and other people are great bosses, and they're providing you great opportunities. They're helping you and improving your productive abilities. So yeah, I think it really matters on what they mean by leadership. I think in this film, they're basically saying that you need some kind of a figurehead who is worshipped or has a almost totalitarian control over the system.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange argument, though. It seems to be making the communist revolution argument that the capitalists are all evil. But yeah, I guess are they saying that Harris is, well, wait a minute. Let me think about this.
But then he's also working with the communist leader from the back. So they're in collusion with each other. And that's the part I liked. That's the part that was like, fuck yeah, they're in on it together to screw everybody.
Yeah. No, I think it's obviously different here. This is a very much a limited, closed environment where resources are strictly limited. But I don't think his reasoning for when he just we have to get rid of people was kind of vague and kind of arbitrary, like because you wanted to maintain this special balance of energy also between the different classes of the train. It was just kind of weird. There was no clear reason why they would take certain actions of getting rid of certain people. If it was just like, we need to maintain a certain population control here because otherwise we're going to run out of stuff, then they would just probably move away the weakest people from the back or something. But that's not what they were doing. They were kind of like finding other ways, and remind me a little bit of the Hunger Games. They were finding these sort of almost entertaining pleasure spiels going on where they enact these coups, different coups, and then they fail, and then they're supposed to fail at a certain points, and then they estimate that so and so many people will die. It's just a very like macabre way of dealing with it, as opposed to just, hey, let's just line these people up and kick them off the train, and that's how we maintain population control. Would have been much easier, but they invented this whole new game of how to do it, which is just really sick.
Yeah, all you really have to do is just turn off the heat to one of the cars. Sorry, you're all dead. You're all popsicles the next day. And then you got popsicles for everybody.
Oh, boy. All right, so Robert, I know you wanted to talk about the ridiculous rifle shootout. So let's get into
Well,
that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is one of the top 10 most ridiculous rifle shots of all time. This is definitely one of the more ridiculous. I mean, the single-minded enforcer character, he was, I guess you could just say he was just so incensed that he had to do some craziness. But they're driving around on this train and they hit this arc. And they're going around this circle, what seems for like a couple of minutes. I don't get it, but whatever. Then he's got this, I mean, it's like an MP40 or something like that. I mean, it's got a shorter barrel than an AR. And he is making a shot through this tempered glass, what I can only assume is like almost bulletproof glass, but definitely thermally, thick ass glass meant to keep the heat in as much as possible, but it would still leach heat. I'm sorry. It's not gonna, whatever. Anyway, and then not only does he shoot at Chris Evans, which is a good several hundred feet, if not 1,000 feet shot. And at least a couple hundred feet. I mean, it's like a football field with this machine gun, sort of. And then Evans shoots back with this little machine pistol type thing that, I mean, it's not going to be accurate at 30 yards, maybe even 40 yards. I mean, and then they're like hitting bullseyes. If I was there and some guy started shooting at me from that range, I'd just stand there in the middle of the glass and be like, yeah, you're not gonna hit me. It's not gonna happen. And it's not gonna get through the glass, even if it did. And even if it did get through the glass, I can't imagine even do a whole lot of damage to you. So I thought it was a little bit on the ridiculous side that Evans even would shoot back at the guy. Like, even if there's some psycho shooting at you from this distance through that material, why you would stop and waste all your ammo in a completely vain effort to get back at him, just seems silly to me.
Yeah, I won't disagree with you on that. And it did seem just another rather convenient thing to have this 5-minute long turn that just happened to coincide with this moment in time on this track that takes them a year to get around. But
yeah, I mean, you got bullet physics to deal with. You got all kinds of bullet drop. You got the curve, so you got all kinds of physics to counteract your aim. Yeah, the motion. In order to hit Evans, you got to aim like way off from him, and somehow, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's Hollywood bullet mechanics. It's like magic bullets, all of it.
Yeah, so as if they're like rail guns and just like immune to physics. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, unfortunately, we've already been talking for about an hour. So I know you've got more notes, Robert. I know, Olaf, you got more to say. So let's get some of, like the next top 2 or 3 things and then start to wind this one down. I wish we could talk longer, but
there's just one thing there that kind of like touched upon what you just said. Would just happen to be at this moment in time for during an entire year that it takes to make the path. The same when they were in the kids section, right? To say, oh, you know what time it is now, kids? Now it's time to look outside to see those people who tried to, see how far they went in the last revolution, and they're like frozen corpses up there at the hill. And they're just supposed to remember once a year that this is now the time to look at that. It's just like I thought that was funny and kind of like. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then also like the Happy New Year pause in the melee fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some elements like that kind of made me laugh, but yeah, it made the whole experience a little bit weird.
Yeah, and I missed the chicken car. Where did all those eggs come from?
That too. We never get to see the actual chicken, but look good. The eggs.
Yeah, no, strong eggs, definitely. Nice white shells.
All right. So, Robert, what's your hottest note left, and then we'll summary.
The last thing I think we're talking about, I suppose, is the child labor being the straw that breaks the camel's back for Chris Evans, who is, he's kind of being seduced by Wilford's dark side, And he's like, man, do we really need a leader? Should I be the leader guy? And then he sees the little kids working on the train engine. And he's like, oh, hell no. This is all going down. This is bad. He's a bad guy. And
Running a sweatshop.
yeah, I mean, and this is the classic liberal argument that, capitalists are evil because they'll even exploit children, where it's an incredibly luxurious argument to make. I mean, if it's down to starvation or survival, everybody needs a chip in. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. If the little kids are the only ones that can do it, wouldn't you want the little kids to do it? Or you're all going to die? Is that better? So I thought it was a ridiculous plot point that would be the thing that turns Chris Evans to be like, oh no, I was right. He's bad. It seems like a reasonable thing. Of course, he kidnapped the kids. He didn't be like, hey, we need the kids for this specific thing, and here's why, and bring the parents up to see the problem and, really involve everybody and teach everybody what's going on. He just kidnaps them. Yeah, of course, that's evil. But child labor isn't the most evil thing. It's not like parents don't love their children that have them employed. They need them to work in order to survive. Anyway.
Yeah, and also if usually according to the type of logic and the arguments that they're trying to make, is that the only thing we need here is to deploy some labor unions to places like Bangladesh or Sierra Leone, and everything will just be great. I mean, are you serious? Like, they work because they're poor, so they need to work. You pass a law that prohibits them from working. You're essentially almost giving them a death sentence here, where you're sending their kids into prostitution or something like that. So the sweatshop doesn't look so bad in comparison to those other two options that are available to them after you take away their best option.
Yeah, government likes to come in when there's been enough wealth created and then say, oh, now it's illegal to have child labor. And then they get all the credit for eliminating child labor, when in reality it's the wealth that allows for the kids to not have to work and to be able to go to schools or have their summers off and play around in the yard or do whatever, something unproductive, or to learn for future productivity. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think that's what makes me hate that damn Carol Baskin. She used to deal in tigers, and then she got out of that business and tries to outlaw it for others. If you guys been watching Tiger King,
what the hell are you talking about?
The government. Oh, you guys
I have not seen Tiger King. I know it's the latest craze. I haven't seen it myself.
I don't know, but I'm not fully understanding what's going on there, but I heard.
All right. Well, I just tried to hard pivot and segue into something relevant, culturally relevant, but you two Luddites don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
We have no clue.
Is it really good? I've heard nothing but good things.
So far, it's wacky and wild and pretty good. So yeah, it's unbelievable, and it's 10 years in the making, and they just happen to get all this content before it went off the rails, and then they turned it into something pretty magnificent. So Tiger King, everyone, check it out.
Is it a complete story?
Well, we're halfway, so but I imagine it goes somewhere. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a thing.
Unlike Snowpiercer, it just goes around and around.
Until it goes off the rails at the end.
Oh, you're right.
We are
and then the mother and father of humanity walk off.
Yeah, I don't know. We never know what happens to them, though. Like that looks pretty. It looks pretty grim. Those conditions. Are you gonna?
You still got to eat something, right?
Yeah, they eat polar
shelter somewhere.
Yeah, I guess the polar bear is supposed to represent that there is still something living outside of the train.
Right.
So perhaps it is cooling or whatever, or warming up again.
Yeah.
But that polar bear would have had to come from another polar bear You know, it's not just going to spring out from the snow like fully formed. So things were alive the whole time.
Yeah, they must have been, right? Otherwise, yeah, they're not everything was extinct.
Yeah, and I guess Robert, you were saying they're going to spring forth humanity out of these two people, like a 7-year-old and a 17-year-old.
Yeah, that's right.
Probably a few decades in the future, but
no, you got to get started soon as you can, because you don't got time, and you got to make a whole bunch of kids. I mean, you're going to have a limited genome.
Yeah, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird. There's no Snowpiercer 2, at least not yet.
No.
All right. Well, let's do final summaries and reviews. Olaf, I'll go to you first. Your takeaway from the film. Also, throw in why you suggested it, because I usually do that at the beginning, and now we are at the end, and I didn't do that, so here we are now. And a score 1 to 10, if you would, please.
Yeah. No, I thought, I was already, looking at what was going on with the virus at the time, although it wasn't really bad over here yet. But I figure we need to watch something, that we can relate to in a time of hardship like this and we're going through. So something like this would be appropriate, just to have some perspective. And this dystopian film of failed scientific experiments to curb global warming turns into a nightmare where people are trying to survive in a closed environment that is a train that is now carrying humanity in its cars, on its shoulders, of this omnipotent engine that is hold to a deity status, and where all the battle between the lower ranks of the car and the upper ranks of the car is constant throughout the entire movie, where they eventually just everything blows up and you have a couple of survivors. But I don't know how I would rate this. I would probably, from a scale 1 to 10, maybe I'll have to go with a 5, right in the middle. I wasn't a big fan, but the longer the movie went on, the more you got glimpses of its past that you hadn't understood yet. A little bit more appreciation grew once I understood, like you said, and I also had an appreciation for this once I got to understand why so many people were missing limbs, for instance. I didn't know that. And so then I realized, oh, well, they practice cannibalism, but you don't find out until much later. But there are some elements there in the movie also that's kind of laughable and ridiculous. So I'll have to, I'll give it a 5, and I think maybe I'm almost a little bit generous there.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, my take is pretty similar. In watching this, I was like, what's all the buzz about? Especially like halfway through, I'm like, this is just dragging on. There's just like senseless things happening. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It certainly has some style to it. And I guess, if you're a big fan of this guy's work, you'll see, you'll see like his kind of look and feel. And it did have a little bit of a twist to it. And at the end, I started to appreciate it more, especially when it came to be that the two ideologies that are supposedly opposite each other are actually working together in collusion to deceive the masses and make them willfully ignorant of what's really going on. And so I thought that was actually kind of a saving grace for the film. So I'm going to go with a slightly higher 6 when I would have been at a 5 until towards the end there. So we'll go to you, Robert, for your take.
Okay. Well, this is one of those rare times when Robert liked the movie more than anybody else. So strap in. I thought the acting and the directing and the cinematography was all quite excellent. I found the world that Bong created to be engaging. As a communist class struggle metaphor, I think the movie falls down. But for a dystopian sci-fi future film, I was engaged the whole time. It's a little bit wacky, a little bit weird, and of course, the world building in a closed system, the economics are all going to fall down, and you got to kind of just put that out of your head. It didn't go for the romance angle, which is usually a good way to engage the heart, but it still had a whole lot of pulled on like sympathetic heartstrings with all the horrors that the main characters were having to deal with. Of course, the villain is the heartless evil capitalist trope, which we've never seen that in a movie, even though they all owe him their lives. It's kind of annoying that even though he has literally, no debate about it, improved their lives, they all hate the guy. Now, of course, he does evil stuff, but they don't appreciate the things that he has done for them, like create this train. Now, of course, all the horrors that they have endured, they're like, well, I would probably rather be dead. But clearly they don't. There isn't like a massive suicide problem. So, yeah, things could be better. But just because a thing exists doesn't mean somebody owes it to you. Yeah, there's, humanity, and it sucks. And it's nice to be a good person and help each other out. And they would all be in that together in a real world situation. All these people would be in it together, living on this little train in this little bubble. And you would want to work together to figure out all the problems that beset you. But instead, they went with a world where all the problems are taken care of and all the problems are human made, as opposed to, environmentally man versus environment. It's man versus man sort of environment because, it's a closed system. They don't have enough food for everybody, but it's essentially man created problems. Anyway, I thought this was great in terms of just pure visual storytelling and sci-fi entertainment. So I would give that like an 8. But since it's like a metaphor for communist class struggle, then that's more like a 6. So I'm going to split the difference and say this is a 7.
All right, so not too far off. Go 5, 6, 7. Not too bad. It's like a place order for the back half of a horse race where we're all the losers. But that's okay. We're all losers right now, being in quarantine and shutting down the economy and destroying all the productive value that could have been made otherwise in the last month of March so far. And it looks like we're on our way to another month in April and potentially May.
Wait, are communists happy about all this? Because then there's all this labor that isn't being exploited, right?
Yeah, they should be
all
very
the workers
happy.
aren't being exploited.
There's lines. There's lines now, bread lines to get into stores.
This is all good times.
There's a scarcity on the shelf.
We're living in the communist utopia right now. We didn't even know it.
It's a little bit of a test run. A little bit of a test run, at least. A little taste of what is to come if you actually end up in the
Are you guys enjoying your 30-day free trial of communism?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Olaf, thanks for coming on, and I hope you can stick around for a little bit longer for Kathleen Turner Overdrive. I know it is late for you, so we will try to not make it too late, but also enticing enough for people to join us there and pay us some dollars while they're still worth something, even though like $6 or $8 trillion just got generated out of nothing. So I guess get your cash while you can and use it for something good. Maybe helping Thomas Massey get reelected. He did a baller move this week, trying to at least get people to put their name on this monstrosity of a vote for this stimulus package. So that was a very noble effort on his part. He was the lone dissenter to actually say anything contrary. So he's earned a few big kahuna points from me. He was just on Dave Smith's show, so I would recommend checking that out. And I'll put a link to that on the show notes page because I think it is really worth hearing what he has to say. I think he had something relevant there. So anyway, we will be back next week on an Easter egg hunt, Robert. We're going to invite back the Anarcho Christian and do another Easter movie.
Ooh.
We did
Passion of the Christ last year, right?
The Passion of the Christ last year. Us two atheists were on for that with him, and it went pretty well. I was a little nervous going into it, but I thought we handled ourselves pretty well. And this time we're going to be doing Richard Burton's classic, The Robe, which I had not heard of until he said it.
What's that?
So, it's a epic masterpiece.
Classic, you said. Classic masterpiece, Daniel. How could we? Neither one of us have heard of it. Olaf, have you heard of this thing?
I've not seen it. I've not seen it, so I cannot speak for it. Yeah.
Everyone go out and see it. So
when was this thing made, Daniel?
Late 50s or early 60s. Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor's husband. He's
The Robe.
The Robe. It's called The Robe, and we've got access to it in our Voodoo catalog. So check it out. It's probably 3 or 4 hours long. So
great. One of those.
Suddenly, you got anything to do? Come on. Quarantine time.
Can we also watch Cleopatra and Ben-Hur and the 10 Commandments at the same time?
Back to back to back to back. Yes.
Perfect.
But we're only going to talk about The Robe. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do next week. And hit us up on Patreon. You can find the show notes more for this episode at lastnight.com/118. We'll have all of Olaf's previous appearances, Spirited Away, and the Outlaw King. And we'd love to have you back again in the near future. Whatever you'd like to talk about, it's always a good time with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Olaf, for sure.
All right, so we will say goodnight from last night, everyone. See you next week as we talk about The Robe. And stay safe out there, everyone. Wash your hands. All right, we've got a few more minutes on the actual Anarchy podcast. This is episode 175 of the show. You've been listening to us talk about Snowpiercer, and I usually try to save some crazy question for the end here, but I guess where do they go from here? I mean, these two people survive this train crash, but they're all alone, and there's nothing really for them to survive on other than eating polar bears. I think they just die off like within a couple hours. I think that's just the end of the...
They don't survive the first night. They got the coat, they got some fur boots, but they got no tools, no food, no shelter. They can make a snow cave, but they have no way to make fire. I mean, they got the burning thing, but they weren't taking anything with them. They are dead.
Yeah, and where does this fur coat come from, and the fur boots, and the ones for the kid that just happen to fit him perfectly? Why would they have such a thing on this train? And how did they magically have it right then after this massive crash that blew up the train and killed Chris Evans, who now is missing an arm, and then he sacrificed his life? Why did he stick his arm in that thing too? Why not one of those chairs or one other thing that's available in that luxurious
metaphor, Daniel? That's what leaders do. They lose their arms.
Well, she seems to have gotten the fur coat from like the drug orgy kind of degenerate car. You know,
that's true. Yes.
Yeah, the ravers wear fur coats.
Yeah. So she got the fur coat there. I didn't see when the kid got the fur coat. That just like appeared to me out of nowhere. I don't know where he got that from. But she got it from there and kind of like had it on for a while before that.
Right, and she was all hopped up on this combustible drug.
Yeah, that drug. Oh, what is that?
Yeah, now the dad, he was saving it to use it as an explosive because he had this master plan to blow up the side door to get out. Mm-hmm. But his daughter, who, I mean, she was really an addict. And I thought that was kind of surprising that he would be, I don't know, kind of facilitating that or even encouraging it in his own daughter. I think that my kids will not be encouraged in such a way.
Yeah, but you're not living on a train, Daniel.
That's true. Well, I might as well be at this point. I'm living on, an eighth of an acre or whatever this is here, and I'm confined. I'm imprisoned in my own home. It's
I
like
how this security engineer, the smartest guy on the train, probably, right? Except for Wilford, maybe Wilford is smarter. But among sort of the peasants, right, this guy is clearly the most brilliant one. He's also the most like high up, brain fried on this drug, and he also happens to be East Asian, right? It's the highest IQ guy in the train.
Yeah, I think I've seen him in some other South Korean films. He's a good actor.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and I should have figured that would have played a role in your liking of this film, because I know that you are a fan of Korean cinema. We did a movie a couple of years ago that was actually quite good. What was that called? The one about
We did a couple of them. Did we do Old Boy, or did we do I Saw the Devil, or was it another one?
The Devil. I Saw the Devil was the one, and then we also did a Jet Li movie, Hero. That was Chinese, right? That wasn't Korean.
Yeah, that's not South Korean for sure.
Yeah, and then I know we The Host is supposed to be good, and so is The Raid.
The Host is pretty decent. I haven't seen the original Raid. I think I've seen Raid 2 not too long ago. Well, a couple of years ago. But yeah, a lot of strong stuff out of South Korea.
Okay, we'll throw another South Korea flick at the audience in a little short while. But I've got a full slate of things coming all the way up through June. So we'll be quite busy. And Olaf, we'd love to have you back. As always, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, whenever there will be a date available in the future, let's talk about that maybe a month in advance, and then we'll just pick a movie and we'll go from there. That's, like we did. That it works.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, audience. Thank you, Olaf. Thank you, Robert. And we'll be back next week with The Robe. This is episode 175 of the show. Show notes and more at actualanarchy.com/175. We're going to get in some Kathleen Turned Overdrive, which is our Patreon bonus content. And you can get access to that at actualanarchy.com/Patreon. And we'll say maximum freedom, everyone, and stay safe out there. And we'll see you next week. Peace out.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.